We are live, so welcome everyone who has just joined. We are going to wait just a couple of seconds for other attendees to join. Well, probably a couple of minutes actually, but whilst we wait for everyone to join, we have actually got a poll running and we would love our attendees to get involved with that. So the question that we have for you is, what characteristics have you experienced, if you have experienced, imposter syndrome? So a couple of things that scream out to me, I guess, self-doubt and fear that I won't live up to expectations. I don't know whether that's something that you've experienced, Ayesha.
Yeah, I would say in different situations, different circumstances, all of these can be applicable. Personally, the one that is that stands out the most to me would be setting unrealistic goals, kind of unattainable goals, really setting the bar really high, and then having that element of disappointment when I'm not able to reach that. And it's actually something that I didn't ever attribute to imposter syndrome. So it's really interesting to think of it in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how are we getting on? Has anyone else have can you see these, by the way? Donna, Katie, Amy, Shweta, can you see the characteristics?
Yeah.
Do any of those scream out to any of you?
Definitely. I think I would definitely agree with the self-doubt as well. Constantly, I guess, in all the different roles you play in life, there's always an element of it, which is to some extent healthy. But I guess when it gets too intense, that's when it can be quite detrimental to your own well-being and your own performance, really. Overachieving, working out of hours, constantly trying to kind of prove that you are, right for the role.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I guess you experience when you first move into a new job as well, because you know that these people don't know you inside out necessarily, if they're people that you've not worked with before, and you really feel like, oh goodness, they're paying me all this money to do this, and I just got to really make sure that they're convinced by my
Exactly. I think that actually feeds into that fear that you won't live up to expectations all the time, especially when it comes to promotions, and as you advance in your career, you really think, oh gosh, now it's that added pressure. How do you look at it? Do you look at it as a challenge that you're gonna live up to, or do you actually feel like where the imposter syndrome comes in, are you going to be called out as a fraud?
Yeah. Oh gosh, imagine. Anyone else have any input on that?
I'm having trouble seeing the questions. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Not to worry. Technical issues. It's fine. We can overcome those. It was typical characteristics, Shweta, were kind of self-doubt, overachieving, sabotaging your own success, setting unrealistic goals, or fear that you won't live up to expectations, attributing your success to external factors, or an ability to assess your skills and competence.
Yeah, I think one of them that stuck out to me was attributing your success to external factors, where I sometimes, or women in general tend to be like, oh, I just got lucky and I got that role or whatever. But instead, I think we should be confident and be like, well, you know what? I've earned that role through all of my hard work and history, instead of just be like, oh, that was just lucky. I was competing against whoever and they just liked me more because of whatever. And I think we all tend to do that. And instead, I think as women, or just in general, as people, we need to be better about that and, take pride in your achievements, and it's okay. There's no such thing as, obviously be humble, but at the same point, it's okay to, speak highly about yourself and think highly about yourself. So definitely somewhere I think we can all improve for sure. And I have to myself.
It's kind of similar to accepting compliments, isn't it? It's like when somebody says, oh, that's a nice shirt. And you go, oh, it only cost me £20.
Oh my God.
And it's like, people don't need to know that. I could have said it was thank you.
Exactly.
Exactly. Something my husband taught me. He said, just say thank you. Okay. But it just feels so strange, doesn't it? Just say thank you. And that's actually really important in terms of self-talk as well, to just like you say, should really own it. Definitely. No explanation, no justification needed. It's actually a compliment to you.
Yeah,
exactly. Okay, so I think we're just about to, I think we should kick off actually. So welcome everyone that's just joined, and welcome to BioTalent's Social International Women's Day themed webinar. So today we will be discussing overcoming imposter syndrome, and we are very lucky to be joined on the panel by 5 inspirational women in STEM. So thank you guys for coming on and taking time out of your evening to talk to us today. You can expect an hour of a panel discussion with a live Q&A throughout, and half an hour of networking for those that wish to continue the conversation further. So I just want to note that this is being recorded, and this recording will be uploaded to our Trenovo Group YouTube channel, where you can access our previous webinars. And we're also going to be formulating a podcast with the audio on Spotify. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Ella Jobson. I am a senior client engagement manager here at iTalent. So I've actually been recruiting medical affairs and clinical development professionals for the last 12 years across both Europe and more recently the US. As one of 2 women on the sales floor, when I first joined the recruitment industry, I guess unknowingly experienced imposter syndrome firsthand. But I'm delighted to actually see that 50% of my current team members are female, which is great. And that's really largely down to the fact that here at Trenovo, our group mission is to build diversity, create inclusion, and encourage workplace innovation. So it's really kind of built into the fabric of our thinking. So we felt there was no better time to introduce our first webinar topic, webinar on this topic, I should say, which is coinciding with International Women's Day and Mother's Day happening this Sunday in the UK, not in the US, I believe. So on the subject of fabulous females that I currently work with, I'm now going to pass over to my colleague and co-host Ayesha to take it away. Ayesha.
Thank you, Ella. Yes, hello everyone, welcome. My name's Ayesha Tabbal. I help to build diverse teams within the diagnostics and biotechnology space. And from my experience and from my insight into the field, it is really clear that there is a quite significant gender gap in STEM. So for example, according to AAUW, women only make up 28% of the workforce in STEM. And the higher up you go, the lower this number gets. So if we're looking at board members being women, that's only 19%. And thinking about women CEOs in STEM, it's very shocking 3%. So it's not all doom and gloom, though. The number is rising and things are moving in a positive direction. Big Rents also reports that the number of women in STEM board positions rose by 18% in 2020. And women's enrollment in STEM university courses rises by about 6% each year. So, yeah, as I said, we are moving in the right direction. But with that, new issues arise. So one of them being imposter syndrome, which is something that we're going to be deep diving into today. Being the first or the only, I'm not sure if anyone's heard that phrase, first or only. It is something that can bring about feelings of isolation or insecurity. And that often ends up being internalized as there's something wrong with oneself as opposed to the environment. I think Young summarizes really well. She said, the problem is, if there isn't many of you, or if you're the first woman to do something, you're going to feel pressure to represent that entire group, which can contribute to imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome doesn't exist in a vacuum. We also have to think about how intersectionality comes into play. So minority women in STEM fields are lacking even more in representation. And according to Stanford Business, women in STEM get paid $61,000 in their first jobs as opposed to $65,000 for men, despite having the same degrees and the same grades. And lacking the confidence at the beginning of your career can have a really negative domino effect throughout. And with us at Trenovo, through our D&I work streams and our talent advisory services, including our unconscious bias training with our L&D team, we are helping our clients address these issues and foster a more inclusive and diverse workplace.
Thanks, Ayesha. That's great. So, yeah, we want to make the discussion as engaging as possible. So if you have any questions for our panel throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask them in the side panel or obviously in the Q&A session, which will start at 7. And we'll get through as many of these as possible, but we do have quite a few questions for the panel ourselves. So I guess what would be great is if we could go round the panel first of all, if we could do initial introductions, and if you can introduce yourself and your role, your place of work, experience, and really what inspired you at either school or college to work in STEM. So should we start with you, Katie?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So I'm Katie Adisico, beside my scientific name, which was difficult to change. So that's where the double name comes in. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Northampton, and I'm the owner and founder of Positive Psychology for Life, a consultancy that offers bespoke training to businesses, educational settings all around mental health and well-being. I'm also the mother of 3, so if you do hear children in the background, that'll be my voice. I think what inspired me in school to go towards STEM and academia, the only thing I really loved in biology was the brain and everything around psychology and why people behave the way they do. So yeah, it was quite an early interest, I think, and it just went from there, I suppose.
Thank you so much for that. Donna, how about you?
Okay, so I'm Donna Connew. I'm a chemist by training, and I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry sort of all my career. I'm now a qualified person for people that understand what that is about release of product to market, and I'm the VP head of quality for a small German company called Pion. And we make specialty hospital products for sort of emergency situations and anesthesia. I think probably sixth form was where I really got the bug about science, because doing those A levels in chemistry, that's what really hooked me in. Less so the physics, but definitely the chemistry. And it was all about the practical. So I think I nearly went into banking, nearly. And I thought, no, my real love here is the actual practical side of science, of doing those experiments and the actual sort of hands-on type stuff. And so I've ended up in pharmaceuticals as an analyst, as a production chemist and what have you, doing big scale experiments, which actually I've always really enjoyed. And a lot of time it hasn't seemed like real work when I've actually been in, doing my practical stuff. I do less of that now. I'm a bit more sort of desk orientated now. But I'm still, my real love of it is still getting in production and seeing stuff happen, getting into the labs and trying to get sort of close to where all the action is at the bench and things like that. So I think it's definitely something that clicked with me and made me realize that that's where I wanted to be for my career. So yeah, there we are.
It's so great to hear that you're, so passionate about what you do still, and you still have that drive and passion for science day to day. So thank you very much for sharing. What about you, Amy?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Amy. I'm a software engineer at a company called Fundamental VR. So we make VR simulations to train surgeons. But I'm actually a general engineer by trade. So I studied engineering science at university, where they called banking the dark side. So I'm glad you stayed away from that, Donna. And I think my kind of earliest memory of getting into STEM and being really fascinated by physics in particular was as a kid at school and being gifted for Christmas these circuitry kits. I don't know if any of you guys have also had these, but we used to make these. It was like Lego, but electric circuits, and you could add things like light bulbs and fans, and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I remember playing with them for hours on end. So I think that's kind of when it started clicking for me that I was interested in how things work and how to make, just build things. Yeah, but that's me.
Great, thanks so much. And Shweta, over to you.
Yes, hi, I'm Shweta Patel. I'm a physician by background, and I'm the CEO and founder of our company Joy Ela LLC, which is a medical consulting firm does various things. One of them is actually I guide clinicians into the pharmaceutical world and kind of help them understand that these worlds are not as different as they may seem, and their skill set is not as different as it may seem. So that's one. And then I'm also a medical director. I was at Rexo Pharmaceuticals, and I'll be moving to AstraZeneca in the upcoming weeks as their medical director. And, you know, several things I'll say. One of the things that I had two options growing up. My passion was either dancing or science. So obviously, you know, science won, but I still like to dance. But so I loved the human body. I loved being able to just, you know, understand how things work in there, how, you know, how to treat things, how to cure things. And as time went along, I also loved children. So I always wanted to be a pediatrician. However, you know, through time, kind of realized you're more of a doctor for the parents versus the kids. So that didn't really work out. And then as I got deeper into my career, I realized, you know, the pharmaceutical world kind of knocked at my door, and I loved it because here I have an opportunity to not just treat one patient at a time, but treat 1,000 or sometimes 1,000,000 patients at a time, you know, depending on the things we find. So it's been a very satisfying and gratifying experience overall throughout the career. And, you know, I learn every day. And I love it. I'm also, like Katie, a mother of 3. So, you know, that's another full-time job. That's always fun and keeps me on my toes. But definitely, thank you.
Great, thanks. So we're not only talking to women in STEM, we're also talking to mums in STEM as well, which is another interesting aspect to it. It's really nice to see that actually the panel have experience across all 3 kind of core areas within science as well. So we've got the physics, we've got biology and chemistry, so it's great. So perfect. So I guess my question to all of you would be, what does imposter syndrome mean to you, first of all? So who would like to start?
I don't mind going first. I think essentially I would say it's very much associated for myself with self-doubt, and also just as a characteristic at the beginning said, the fear of not just meeting expectations, but exceeding expectations. So that need that I seem to feel of having to even exceed what is expected of me. So I think that's definitely something, especially over the last 2-3 years, where I've actually started my own consultancy. There was always this element of it, you know, and it was my husband that kind of pushed me to do it and said, come on, do it. And you know, you've got the knowledge and everything, why don't you do it? People with less qualifications are doing this. And I just thought, oh, yeah, why am I not doing this, you know? And there's been loads of instances where I thought, yeah, I'm probably suffering from imposter syndrome. And actually, although I'm quite ambitious and I've been successful in many ways, it's probably also holding me back and also bothering myself, you know, and my well-being in that sense as well. And I think that also goes across professional and personal life as well, because if you're already, there's different personalities within imposter syndrome, but you know, one of the ones is perfectionism, for example, and you want to be, or, you know, the superhuman, you want to be great in everything you do. And that's definitely something that I want to be the best mum in the world. You know, I want to be the greatest wife to us, and I want to be absolutely the best lecturer the students ever had. And, you know, in my consultancy as well, I want people to think, no, this is actually a training that I won't forget, the practical skills that I learned from it. So I guess that's that internal pressure as well that's very much related to this imposter syndrome for myself. So and I think that leads to sometimes overworking, or also perhaps avoiding things. So for meaning to write a book for years, you know, and by being busy having 2 children, it's one of those things, you know, you just think, actually though, I could have probably, you know, I should just do it. Like something is holding me back. So it's very interesting. It is great to have opportunities like this to unfold it all.
I really like that point that you just made about avoidance. Again, something that I didn't realize was down to imposter syndrome is procrastination and perfectionism. They are hand in hand. So if you don't think you're going to do something perfectly, just rather not do it at all. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because there's a lot of angles to it, a lot of things that fall into imposter syndrome. So very interesting.
And I think as women in STEM, that's one of the things that's kind of almost ingrained in us as our careers have developed, that you have to, you know, and we're kind of used to being at the top of our class or top of our, jobs or whatever it may be. So in our heads, it's like, unless we're at the top of everything or we're perfectionists at it, we're just not going to do it. And so in my opinion, if somebody told me it once in my career, they're like, you actually fail by not trying even before you even try and fail, and it was a little statement like that, but it stuck with me because it's very true. So you never know in this world until you actually try, but it's difficult to do that when you kind of question yourself and, can I do this? Will I do it well? Will I do justice to this position? Will I do justice to this role, whatever that may be, personal or professional?
Mm. And I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things that I struggled to come to terms with that a little bit earlier on in my career. And then I suddenly thought, well, actually, what's the worst that's going to happen if I have a go? What is the worst that's going to happen? The world is not going to cave in and, it's all going to be a disaster. It might actually be that somebody notices me having a go and thinks, didn't know they could do that. And that's a bit of a realization as well, of actually saying it's okay. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Maybe even half perfect or half wrong even would be fine. At least you've had a go. And I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, great. Thank you for all your contributions. It's really interesting to hear. Amy, I have a question for you, which is kind of targeted to you, just because I guess you're fairly recently out of university and fairly new to the industry. But how do you feel how has imposter syndrome evolved throughout your career from school to university to now your full-time job?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I'm obviously relatively new to the industry, but I think it's interesting to see how much it's changed because, as Shweta touched on, at school, I never really felt imposter syndrome at all because, you're used to being good at your subject or top of the class, or it wasn't until I went to university and suddenly the dynamic of my learning environment changed totally. So I went to an all-girls secondary school and then I went to do a heavily male-dominated engineering degree, and suddenly I just felt that I just didn't belong at all. And it was that kind of sensation of feeling everyone else deserves to be there except me, which doesn't make any sense because obviously nothing had changed about me. The only thing that had changed was my learning environment. So it was at university that I first started to experience it. And to be honest, I think with now in industry, it's kind of decreasing, which is nice because I think obviously one of the main ways to tackle imposter syndrome, I think, is having confidence in yourself. And when your learning environment or your working environment is full of people that give you that confidence and give you that kind of encouragement, that's when you can start to diminish those feelings a bit more. So I think it's really important to remember that so much of the time it's about your environment, it's not about you.
Absolutely. And do you feel that it was kind of in your head versus comments that were made or what have you towards you? It was just like you were very aware of the environment and the fact that you were female in a very male dominated environment.
Yeah, it was kind of a bit of both. I think probably mainly in my head. I didn't really have, none of my peers would ever say to me, you don't belong here, or but at the same time, sometimes comments are made about you being the only girl, or people say things like, I think a lot of my peers mention things like positive discrimination, which I'm sure we'll touch on later, is quite a controversial topic. But I think as great as it is for getting representation into the field, people don't realize the impact that can have on women's mental health and this sense of imposter syndrome. Because even though you may be trying to say you support it and you're trying to make a woman feel better by saying it's great that we're getting more women in this field, sometimes people don't realize that can just make you feel like you've just been given a leg up, or you're just filling a quota. So detrimental.
Very good point indeed. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Okay, and Katie, as working in the psychology environment, I'm very interested to know how do you feel you can take control and have a healthy response to failure?
I think in a nutshell, really, is first of all realizing what is in your control, and one of those things is your perspective and the way you look at things. So I think Donna and Shweta touched on that a bit earlier. how do you look at failure? Do you look at it as a sentence on your ability, or is it an opportunity to grow? Right? And it's important to ask yourself that question, because that really differentiates between whether you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And a lot of times the way that we look at it, the perspective that we choose to take very much is whether or not we are actually having a healthy response or a very unhealthy response to failure. Because if you ask yourself, what would you say? I don't know about you, Shweta, but one thing I always say to my boys is, you learn, and anything you learn from mistakes. Okay, yeah. Failure is part of success. It's about growing. And that's something that I need to actually tell myself. The same thing we tell our children, right? The same thing that you would tell your friend. That compassion is often lacking when it comes to ourselves. So I think it's just important to kind of really be a bit more self-aware about the perspectives that you choose to take, and also the kind of thought traps that you find yourself in. You know, do you have those internal rules where you use language such as you should exceed expectations, or you always have to get it right, you never can make a mistake, or things like that? Are they really unrealistic and rigid, those words that you're actually using internally? And that's really important, because once you identify and become more aware of those, you can actually challenge those unhelpful thoughts as well, and try and really write it out. You know, what is actually the alternative to that thought? Is that actually a fact? Because a lot of times our thoughts are not fact, you know, and that's a big thing to remember as well. So I think once you've established that kind of awareness around it, and realize how much is actually in your control when it comes to that, and how you respond to failure, that's the best way forward, really. So you can actually experiment and test around and really catch yourself out and try and change your you know, your kind of view to yourself, your compassion, the things you choose, how to look at it, you know, instead of saying, oh, I'm an idiot and I've done this again, or I've reached here by luck. No, you know, actually have a little check-in. This is, you know, you've qualified, you've studied, you've made it so far for a reason.
And maybe kind of defining. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what Katie just said, it's true. So one of the things I tell my children, I have a son and 2 daughters, and especially the girls, I mean, even my son, is ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and don't be shy. And actually ask them every day when they come home from school, what was the one question you asked? At least tell me one question you asked somebody today. That way they're not, you know, and they get used to being okay that you don't know everything, and it's okay not to know everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it kind of goes hand in hand with failure, right? Because if you don't know everything, you're obviously going to fail at some things in life, and that's okay. But if you know how to get beyond that and keep asking questions or keep moving along, I think that will be a great success. And think, you know, trying to teach the next generation and ourselves, of course, at that point, I think it's very important as well in able to, you know, overcome imposter syndrome for males and females overall.
And actually, just to add to that quickly as well, it's about the praise that we use. It's traditionally and generationally just gone the wrong way. You know, I bet all our parents, if they did praise us, some parents might have not even gone that extra mile, you know, but if they have, it's very much, well done, clever girl, or, you know, or you're too clever for your own boots, or it's, you know, comments like this. Whereas nowadays, luckily, with education around us, we're more aware, you know, so we really try and praise them in a more growth mindset kind of manner. You know, well done, you worked so hard, you know, the efforts that you put in there, and that really makes a difference. There's so many studies, so much research around that, at how much people excel and actually are not scared, not afraid of the next opportunity, and actually inviting them in, you know, because they have that growth mindset, they have that, you know, positive praise, but not just on their ability, on their identification as that person, but more on the efforts and the work they put in. We're not robots, you know, we're human beings, so it's so important.
Definitely. I think it's interesting that we touched on mindset, because everything ultimately does stem from that. And thinking about kind of maladaptive thought patterns, I should be this, or I ought to do this. But I think it's important to think according to whom. Like who says that you have to be the best, or you have to achieve XYZ in order to be, you know, worthy of anything. I'm thinking about where that came from, whether society, or like you mentioned, parents who would just be giving us the same information that they had. I think, Exactly. Mindset is where it starts. And you touched on it a little bit, Katie, but Donna, it'd be good to hear from you about how. So mindset, that's one thing we need to tackle, but how do you get into the right mindset to overcome and kind of combat imposter syndrome?
I think it's particularly in the STEM subjects. I think I think you have to say that knowledge is power. If you've got that really solid base where you know your stuff, and you can be confident that you can bring that to discussions, to whatever, then that gives you a really strong basis. And you do see people who try to sort of wing it a bit and what have you, and you think, no, really know your stuff and become known as that. People, I think particularly in the STEM subjects, people respect you for it, and I think it's a way of actually being able to show that you should be there, because actually you can contribute at that level because you really know what you're talking about. And that's not quite the same as sort of always wanting to be top of the class. It's slightly different. Mm-hmm. It's just having that really fundamental underpinning knowledge that you can bring. And I think it gives you that confidence that you can contribute to discussions. And certainly, I've been in loads of situations where, in production and what have you, I'm the only woman in a group. There's engineers, there's production, there's technologists and what have you, and they're all guys. And we're having a big discussion about a situation or something that needs to be addressed. But I know that I can put that in there, and I can have my say, because I've got that underpinning knowledge of the process and the theory in that. And I think it's also good to know that if you get it wrong, you need to, as somebody mentioned, humility earlier, and I think that's really important, to not try and front it out and try and pretend you do know it all, and to actually get to that point where you say, I've got no knowledge of this at all. Has anybody else around here got, who else understands this? And to actually then bring the discussion around to that, and that's a real strength, to be able to do that and not try and sort of front it out, and eventually somebody says, well, you don't know about that, and you have to say, no, I don't really. You don't want to put yourself in that position. So it's very tempting for that sometimes to sort of try and do that, and you have to learn to back off that, I think, and that comes with a bit of experience, I think, of being in those situations.
Yeah, I think that kind of reminds me of one of my favorite phrases that I think actually summarizes it quite well, which is competence builds confidence. I used to really subscribe to the idea of fake it till you make it, like what you just said. And then I thought, actually, no, in the effort that you're putting into faking it, try and become competent in something, and then you will feel confident in it. And I think what you just said is a real sign of confidence, because I used to think when people would, have that front, that, maybe you think a bit like negatively of them, but actually I think that is a bit of a sign of insecurity and not knowing and not being able to say, actually, I don't know. I think being able to admit that you don't know something is like a big sign of confidence. And I think, the way to overcome it really is exactly what you said, confidence, which stems from competence. Much agreed. And then what kind of tips then? So Katie, this is two-sided question, as we're talking about mindset still. So again, if you had anything to add on that last question, but what kind of tips or techniques would you say you have for reprogramming those feelings that may come about from imposter syndrome, like self-doubt, et cetera, et cetera?
Ooh, loaded question, that is. How much time have we got left? No, but I think to give you the best answer, I'll probably say, first of all, it's important to realize that our emotions, they all have their functions. Okay, so we need to move away from that narrative that there are good and bad emotions. So there's always a function. If you feel fear, it's to protect us. So our body knows to protect us. If you anger, there's different functions of all the emotions. So accepting them rather than being scared of them, and therefore also almost being controlled by them, that acceptance will help us to kind of be back in that control, in that driving seat, because we are then not consumed by that emotion. So, and again, emotions, thoughts, and behavior, they're all connected, you know, they're all a cycle. And we talked a lot about mindset and how important that is to really be aware of what kind of mindset, which is a choice. Mindset really is a choice. And I think that's a really powerful thing to remember. And it's no airy-fairy sentence or quote I'm using here. It's literally pure neuroscience. Our brain has got neurons. They're waiting every morning, new baby neurons waiting to make new connections. And to actually really take that in, I think should empower everybody, because you can change your script every single day. You get a new chance. And I think it's very important just to, with awareness first and foremost, realize what it is and why you might have those thoughts and triggers, right? And when I talk about certain thoughts that might be quite unhelpful, I'm talking about those thinking traps where you assume you know what other people think, where you assume you can read their minds and, you know, kind of have an idea of what they might be thinking of you, this predictive thinking, you know, or really all or nothing thinking. All of these things are traps really that you find yourself in. And actually by challenging those, you give yourself that chance to write it out, see what the alternative is. Is that actually fact, like I said earlier? And also, like Donna said, I think write it all the way out. What's the worst that can happen, right? And then that way, again, you are in the driving seat here, and you can break that cycle. And you can change that very much. And of course, building awareness around it, sharing your experience, so important, you know, having a mentor, embracing opportunities where you can have role models or be a role model to other people that might be suffering from that. It's 70%, you know, and it's not just women, actually. It's, you know, it's a lot of people actually that suffer from this. But I think one of the things you said earlier as well, accepting praise. So something so simple. Really watch it, what you do next time when you get when you receive a compliment. Say thank you and nothing else. Just practice that. And I think more and more, the more you practice, I think science say it takes about 6 weeks or so to break a habit. So you just have to really be disciplined and pull through for that amount of time. And then you have a new script, if you like. And just try and really reduce that self-critical and minimizing language within yourself. Always remind yourself, is that really what I would say to my child, or, you know, my best friend? You know, you would actually tell them, oh, maybe you should look at it that way, you know. And again, just bringing it quickly back to growth mindset and fixed mindset, having that mentality of not yet rather than, you know, I failed. It's so important. And I guess that those kind of ways of those are practical ways that you can do. And if anything fails, just remember to breathe, because that usually engages your logical brain, and then that way you can kind of get back.
Breathe.
Yeah,
love that.
Thank you. Yeah, those are all really helpful, and hopefully will help some people to kind of lessen the impact of imposter syndrome. I want to actually circle back to the impact that it's had for you all. So the next two questions are directed at Shweta and Amy. First, Shweta, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think, or rather, how do you think imposter syndrome has the ability to impact the quality of research or work in STEM? This can be kind of your own experiences, or more broadly, what impact do you think it might have?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think, you know, if somebody doesn't feel confident, or somebody doesn't feel that they're, you know, they can really offer something positive to the environment or to that role, they're going to be more shy, more reluctant to offer any potentially great new ideas, you know. And if you have that fear or that lack of confidence in you, where you think in this environment, my suggestions or whatever I say may not be taken so positively, you're going to hold back. And, you know, by holding back, you might have just cured, you know, cancer. You may have that answer, but because you were scared of saying something, you may just, you know, you may hold back. And I think that can definitely hurt us overall as a community, as a, you know, society. And I think, you know, just being one of the things, I think going back to what Donna was even saying earlier, in terms of showing confidence and showing that, you know, it's okay if you don't know something, and it's okay to say that. But one of the things I've learned through my years is, it's okay, definitely have the confidence and, you know, show that, but then have the confidence to say that you don't know something also. However, you are very eager to learn that and you're willing to learn that. And that has honestly helped me in a lot, throughout my career, where I've started several different roles in different therapeutic areas, which obviously no one is, supposed to be a professional in every single therapeutic area out there. And one of the things I always say is, you know what, you're right. I don't know how to do this. However, I am very eager and easily happy to learn. And, I would love for, take some time out from, you and whatever, and, make sure I know this and take that extra time and be willing to take that extra time. And that, that can really help overcome a lot of this stuff, and then helps you gain that confidence. And, it's a cycle effect, basically.
Definitely. Willingness is a big one, willingness to learn, openness to learn. Definitely. Thank you for that. And then Amy, just, regarding the stats that I gave at the beginning, there's obviously an issue there. And we are, taking the steps, even conversations like this, towards moving away from that. But how do you think, or again, do you think that imposter syndrome might come from a wider societal issues or many societal issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of two main ones that stand out for me. I think the first one I touched on already is this kind of idea of positive discrimination and how that can make someone feel when, it kind of has insinuations that it means that you're getting a bit of help to get to a position. But kind of in contrast to that, one of the main ones I have witnessed is, people saying we need to do more. So companies in particular saying we need to do more to attract more women and to hire more women. But I think the issue isn't that they're not selecting women, it's that women aren't applying in the first place. And then you get to the same thing at university when they're saying, if a university gets judged for only having 20% women on a course, well, how many women have even applied for that course? And I just think you can keep backtracking and it comes down to almost like primary school. And like I mentioned with these silly circuit kits that I used to play with, I think if you make the conscious decision to make sure that you're giving the same like toys and opportunities to men and women from such a young age, that there might be a bit of a shift towards the amount of women that go into STEM subjects, because it isn't just about ability. Clearly women are no less able to study these subjects, but I do think, I don't know the answer, but I think it is a lot earlier than a lot of people make out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting. Yeah,
it can be quite frustrating to hear, like we need to increase the number of women that we hire, or we need to increase the number of women that do engineering. And it's like, well, that I'm sure a lot of women want to, but some of them aren't encouraged to a lot earlier down the line.
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to add to that as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say I've experienced that personally myself firsthand, because I remember when I was going to school, I actually went to med school in Poland, and there were many people that discouraged my parents to say, well, why are you sending a girl all the way across the world by herself? You never know, can she handle this? She's a girl. And I constantly hear that. And I remember my mother stood up for me and she's like, you know what? She's a girl, so what? She can do just the same thing that the guy can do, or my son can do. And, and culturally, I think, Amy, you hit it, you're right, because unfortunately, a lot of cultures will also put women at more of the traditional, I'm going to call them, stay at home or whatever kind of roles, or, be the primary caretaker at home and things of that nature. So then even as mothers, I'm a mother now, so I'm very conscious of that, or I try to be, I should say, where I have a daughter who loves working in the kitchen. She loves to cook and she's always wanting to be my little helper. And my son is automatically like, well, I'm okay, mommy, I'm going to go do my homework and whatever. And, I make it a conscious effort. I'm like, no, today's your turn to help me in the kitchen. Tomorrow's her turn. And, just little steps like that. I think if we can all do that, it will really nurture the future CEO that will be a woman instead of the man down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think it comes back to those stereotypes and, really systemic discrimination from very early on, that kind of, we've got so many biases and stereotypes from so early on culturally, within the Western society where we live in, and that's really where the issue lies. And that it's ingrained in us. Even now yourself, Shweta, you said you ask your son to help you, you know, but really it's not helping you. It's adding to the family meal, right?
I know, right? We talked about this. You're right.
Right. So it's that kind of language. And I do that all the time as well. Can you help me set the table? But really, you're not helping me set the table. We're all going to sit down and have dinner. So, you know, and this is how early it starts. It's so ingrained in us as well. We're really all victims of, you know, stereotypes and very biased thinking, so many, and it's only of, you know, the process of becoming more and more aware of these biases that we can change this. And it's so important because, like Amy said, it starts from early on. The toys that we play, the way teachers, you know, attend to girls and boys differently, you know, with emotions expressed and things like that. And it's, you know, already by choosing different toys for children, you activate different synapse connections again, right? So there's no wonder that certain things go certain ways. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but I feel like we've got the knowledge. We just have to now make that difference, basically. Act.
All of the contributions so far have been really, really interesting to hear. So thank you so much. I just want to kind of move on to now having role models, and how can we have more women involved in science specifically and have them as role models to others. Donna, I think this was something that you touched on previously, but yeah, would you mind sharing your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting in terms of who maybe, particularly earlier on in your career, that you sort of look at and you think, oh, I really like what they do and that. And I don't think it always has to be a woman role model. And I think that's really important, because I remember earlier on in my career, I worked for a big pharma company, and I do think that was an advantage, actually. There was a chap who was, you know, sort of sites manager level, and he was quite an unassuming guy, but he had a way of running meetings where everybody got to talk, and he would listen and just throw in comments and that. And then at the end, he would somehow just summarize the whole thing with an amazing, insightful conclusion. And I saw him do it several times, and I thought, God, that's really good. That is really good. And it appealed to my sort of style, because I'm not the sort of person that sort of like jumps in and, like, you know, is at the front of discussions and that. I'm more of the sort of the considered, trying to work out what's going on and what have you. And I thought that I could see myself being that, you know, that appealed to my style. And I think that's one of the important things about when you look for a role model is look what you could see yourself doing that fits your style. And you've got to find that. And it will be different things for different people. But I don't think it has to be a woman that you watch doing it. I think sometimes you can just see what's good, and you can think, how can I adapt what I do to try and get to that so I can do that? And I hope I got halfway there, as good as he was. But it is something that became relevant to me in my career in QA, because that's very much what you need. You need that considered approach and listening to everybody and running a discussion. And it really sort of, I think it really helped me in where I chose to end up. So yeah, it's looking for somebody that fits your style, I think, is important.
Yeah, regardless of gender. That's great. Okay. And how do you feel that we could empower female co-workers and young girls to keep pursuing the fields of STEM and to feel encouraged to do so?
I think encouraging people earlier on in their career to contribute. And if you're running something like, you know, running a discussion or a project, and you think, I need to pull them in, make sure they've contributed, have that opportunity to contribute, to actually say their piece in front of, you know, senior managers. How can I pull them in and give them that opportunity? And sometimes, perhaps as a woman, you see other maybe more junior staff stepping back a bit. So you think, oh yeah, I've been there. How do I pull them in and give them that opportunity? You know, and then speak to them afterwards and say, hey, you did really well. You know, you presented what you needed to do. And I think it's giving back a bit when you've managed to get through that, maybe with not much encouragement, you've had a battle through it, and trying to help people do that is really important.
Definitely.
I think one other thing that's really helpful is offering a work-life balance for not just the women, I'll say, but just anyone, whether it's a male or a female. I mean, one thing I think COVID has taught all of us is, how important a work-life balance truly is, because when the two worlds collide, it's chaos. So, being able to recognize that, especially if you're in a leadership role and if you have a junior staff member that needs a daycare pickup or whatever, again, male or female, doesn't matter, be willing to help, offer a helping hand and be like, you know what, don't worry about it, I'll take this meeting, you go ahead, deal with the family. And just encourage more of those situations will really help people be like, okay, you know what, I can take on this role. This is not something that I can, it's meant for somebody who has like a 15-year-old child or a 30-year-old child. It can be somebody who has, who's a younger mother or a younger father. And I think, offering things like that can be really helpful for our upcoming, generations.
I definitely think, working in recruitment, we've seen a lot of our clients have become more flexible from that perspective. And it's really, really great to see. A lot of them are offering like hybrid working models as well at the moment, which is fantastic. So hopefully that has had a positive change, even though it's been the bane of our lives for 3 years, 2 years. But anyway, hopefully we're nearing the end. Sorry.
Whilst we were talking about empowerment, I just wanted to kind of bring up this idea of male allyship as well. So I think obviously it's not targeted at this panel in particular, but there's lots of things that our male colleagues could be doing to kind of, even if it's just watching the language that you're using around female colleagues, or as you say, like on a call actively, as Donna mentioned, trying to actively get a woman to speak up, or maybe noticing when they may be silenced, or if a man gets there first. And it's not always men. I know that there's a lot of women as well that might be a bit more outspoken, but I do think that it's almost like a mentality shift that we can try and encourage our male colleagues to at least be aware of, so that they are part of the solution rather than causing the problems in the first place.
I think that's a really important point, because I think language sometimes, in terms of differentiating, how people might talk about how a woman comes across, exactly the same thing they would talk differently about how a guy would come across. And I think things are really shifting on that now. People are realizing these sort of inadvertent comments and the impact that they can have, and it's about time too. Because certainly, I would say earlier on in my career, looking back now, I can really see what was going on sometimes. And I think it has improved, and it would be good to see it go further, to really make people aware of the impact, sometimes subconsciously, that can have.
I know in the US, I know in UK, you guys probably are better about this, but one of the things that's a big differentiator here is, when you're on maternity leave, it's usually that if you're a female or a mother, you get, the 12 weeks if you're, FMLA, et cetera, like through the government. But however, if you're a father, it's only 2 to 4 days, sometimes 2 weeks if you're lucky. And a lot of not a lot, actually, some of the bigger companies are now shifting, where I remember I have one of my cousins, he's a male, and he's actually getting 12 weeks off on paternity leave now, as his wife did also. So, it's great, because now, right there, he's no longer, it's not her job to take care of the baby, because her job literally gives her that time off versus his job does not. So seeing those little things like that, I think is really helping our community and our, society, but definitely ways away in America for sure.
Really positive. I wanted to touch on a point as well around mentoring and what I guess this is targeted towards you again, Shweta, actually. So what to you is the power of mentoring, and do you have any tips on how to find the perfect mentor?
Yeah, definitely. I can't emphasize the amount of power that there is in mentoring and finding, whoever your idol may be, whoever you look up to may be. And it's kind of like what Donna said, you have to first realize what you want to be before you go out seeking that person who you want to be. So learning a little bit about yourself and where you want to be and taking some time for some self-care, some self-development, I think is critical. And once you have that and you know where you want to go, it's actually not that hard to find people. And I mean, luckily we're in this technology era where, for example, LinkedIn, it's above and beyond. I've had actually several people have reached out to me on LinkedIn and we'll just, be like, oh, I noticed you're a physician and a female on, at this position whatsoever. Would you mind talking to me about it and telling me how you got there, what kind of steps you took? And, I was more than happy to. And these are full strangers. I don't know them, I didn't help, but then I helped them guide. I would help guide them into, well, this is what you can do to get this job, or if you want this, or just tell them about the different roles because they may not know all of the opportunities that are out there. So again, just don't be shy. Be willing to be open and go ask anyone, literally on LinkedIn, random stranger, and that's okay. Because 90% of the times I'll say most people are pretty nice. I mean, you may get a crazy one, you never know, but generally, I think, people are pretty nice and they want to pay it forward, right? Because somebody did that for them one day. At least in my case, that's true. Somebody did that for me one day. When I was in my clinical training, I had a physician who was a medical science liaison who walked into my, attending's clinic. He was a non-clinical physician. I'm like, wait a minute, how can you be a doctor and not practice medicine clinically? That world did not exist in my eyes. And he took the time to sit there and tell me like, well, this is what I do. This is how I do it. This is how I got there, etc. And it literally has opened up a whole new life for me. And if it were not for him and his, 15, 20 minutes even that he offered that day, I would not be where I am. So I tried to think of that, right? And so that mentor can be literally anyone and anyone you can find. One of my mentors back earlier in my career, he told me one thing that's always stuck in my head is never say no to an opportunity because you just never know where that opportunity will take you. And, that's one thing I've tried to remember. And as different opportunities come, I try to take them because worst comes to worst, they're going to say no to me. And that's okay. I'll learn something from that process that happened. And, but yeah, definitely very much a big proponent of mentors and mentoring others. There's a lot of societies out there as well right now. At least I know in the pharmaceutical industry, we have like medical affairs society, things of that nature, where people who are in, more executive leadership positions can mentor some of the incoming people and things of that nature. But I think LinkedIn is a great resource, or any of the social media, I should say.
Agreed, absolutely. I'm conscious that we've only got 4 minutes left, sadly, of our discussion. But I just want to kind of open it up to the floor and say, what advice would you give to girls and women interested in pursuing a career in STEM, or any final thoughts around hopes and dreams for women in STEM? So I'll leave it open to you guys.
I would say, as cheesy as it sounds, the sky is your limit. Just don't limit yourself, But honestly, just don't be afraid, because fear will always hold you back. And, do basically what we talked about the whole time, the thoughts, behaviors and feelings, just nip in where you can to kind of break that negative cycle and change your thoughts around it. There are opportunities. And somebody else, one thing that pulled me through my PhD a few years ago was literally that thought at one breaking point where I thought, so many other people have done it. Why would I not be able to do it? And I just did it. And and it's just that thinking of you're not any less or any better, right? And those parameters that we're putting ourselves in, they are from society. They are from our self-doubt. They are very much internal upbringing, all the things we talked about. But I think just to kind of have that reality check and be like, actually, do you know what? These are opportunities. They are for everybody. And if I put in the work, the same thing we would tell our children. If you put in the work, if you learn from your mistakes and failures, but the opportunities are there for everybody to go through. So really, to do it. And especially if that's your passion, you'll be successful 100%, because that will always be a motivator and you will become so confident within your field.
Yeah. And I'll say exactly. I was just going to say, I agree with what Katie was saying, and it's exactly true, because one of the things we talked about earlier is trying to be a perfectionist and not asking for help, thinking that's a little bit, people are going to, think less of you because you're asking for help. But kind of like Katie said, it's not help. It's just giving everybody their responsibility and kind of, dividing it and coming together as a team, whether it's a family or professionally. It's okay to ask for help or get people to do things that they are supposed to do instead of trying to do everything yourself. And, you know, and I agree, teaching that to our younger women, that it is not your responsibility to, you know, take care of the kitchen. It is not your responsibility to take care of the children. It is a group, you know, your family overall responsibility, and kind of role modeling that for them, right? You learn what you see. And if we can do that for our younger generations at this point, I think, you know, history won't repeat itself, basically.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate all your thoughts. Donna, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to?
Well, we touched on a couple of things. A couple of people have mentioned things about environment. And I mentioned that I thought that working in a big pharma company was to my advantage, because it was quite sort of forward thinking, and, you know, there was lots of people, and there wasn't just a very small group that had a big influence on maybe the culture within the company. And I think sometimes as a woman, you have to recognize when you're beating your head against a wall, maybe, because if the culture is, if you're in a very small environment and you've got people there who just, you know, they are what they are, shall we say, and there's only so much you can do with them, I think you do have to maybe think, do you know what, this environment doesn't deserve me, I should go somewhere else where they do. And I think sometimes you do have to sort out whether you can overcome maybe something that's there. And it's not, I don't want to sound defeatist about it, but I think it's getting a lot better. I think society is improving, the language is improving, and things like that. But I think your environment should be deserving of you as well. And if they don't deserve you, then somebody else does.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and very inspirational there. Yeah, absolutely.
I love
well, I think that's about it from us, folks. So thank you so much for sharing your morning, evening, or lunchtime with us. Thank you to our speakers for sharing your insights, and to our audience for participating. For anyone who would like to continue the discussion further, please do join our networking session using the link in the chat to meet our panel and discuss the topics from today. So yeah, thank you everyone. I think we'll move on to the networking piece now. So thank you, networking session.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is going to be a poll to see just reflecting on how you promote self-care, something that we really want to promote with this. So please feel free to answer on your way out. And thank you everyone so much.